Good evening, this is Mason Chin and Emily Baker, and here are your news bulletins for January 3rd, 1959. Here are today's top stories.
The USSR's Luna 1 launched today, meaning that Russia is one step closer to full space exploration. This craft is expected to travel out of the Earth's gravitational pull, being the first of most likely many to come. This achievement, however, is very incredible in the world of science and is being shown as a great feat.
In other news, the trouble in Cuba has now seemingly come to a close, with Fidel Castro and his group of revolutionists gaining power in the unsettling country near our Floridian coast. After years of conflict, the revolutionists have ousted the original government and have implemented a socialist rule. Castro seems to have ties with communist Russia and is seen as dangerous. And now that he is in power, we expect to see a drop in American influence in Cuba. With more on this revolution, we go to a special report from Holly.
As the revolution in Cuba ends, Fidel Castro holds control. The revolution began in 1957 and has been violent throughout. The leader of the revolutionary forces, Fidel Castro, has communist beliefs and was attempting to overthrow the Cuban government and eventually gain control of Cuba. He believes in Cuba for Cubans, the belief that Cuba should be run and occupied by only Cubans, not Americans. Because of this, Castro began to seize companies that are owned and run by Americans living in Cuba. Castro threatened the United States by doing this. These actions may potentially lead to military action against him and his forces. Castro has also created ties with Russia. Will Castro and Russia pose a threat to the United States if they become allies? Only time will tell. Back to you, Mason and Emily.
Thank you, Holly. We now move to a primetime special interview with President Eisenhower. Our reporter Letitia had the opportunity to sit down with our Commander-in-Chief to see what his reaction is to the trouble in paradise. Let's take a look.
Today we're lucky to talk to the President himself, President Eisenhower. How are you today, Mr. President?
Great, thank you.
So, I have a few questions about the situation in Cuba.
Go ahead.
So how do you feel about the rise of power of Fidel Castro?
I think it's an issue that we need to correct before it turns out of control and out of our control. We need to do what's best for Cuba.
What do you think we should do to stop his rise of power?
That information is classified, but do know we are doing our best to prevent Cuba from spinning out of control.
Do you think your classified plan may be successful?
I have my doubts, but I can only hope.
Well, thank you for the plan, the insider on the plan, and trust me when I say we're all hoping this works out.
Thank you.
Thank you, it's been a privilege, and back to the studio.
Well, it looks here like trouble is brewing in Cuba.
You got that right, Emily. Fidel Castro is causing extreme political and economical limitations in Cuba. Cubans are fleeing the island and looking to the U.S. for aid.
What will the United States do? Will their plan be successful? What will become of the Cuban leader Fidel Castro?
Tune in next time to hear more about the rising tension and unrest between Cuba and the U.S. I'm Mason Chin.
And I'm Emily Baker. Stay classy, bed north, and see you next time.
Breaking news, the United States has launched an attack on Cuba from Nicaragua.
The date is April 15th, 1961. I'm Holly, and this is Brad from Channel 6 News. The United States has finally reacted to Castro and the revolution in Cuba by attacking them at the Bay of Pigs.
We go to our correspondents live in Cuba for more information.
Thanks, Holly and Brad. We are currently outside a southern coast of Cuba called the Baja de Cochinos, more commonly known as the Bay of Pigs.
That's right, and over the past few days, there have been attacks on socialist Cuba by a group of anti-revolutionary forces. We have been coming to a conclusion that these forces have been armed by the United States based on their equipment. We have heard little about this endeavor from our government, and we're interested to find out more. These forces seem to be made up of Cubans who were kicked out of their country when Fidel Castro came to power. Their guts to try this invasion is truly unbelievable.
We have found that over 1,400 Cuban exiles landed in this inlet of Cuba in the middle of last night to attack and attempt to overthrow the socialist government. These troops are fighting an uphill battle and seem to be losing. Castro's revolutionary defense forces are wailing on the exiles, and this battle does not seem like it will be lasting much longer. Paratroopers were sent in early this morning, and the battle has continued since the start. This is a very dangerous environment, and there's bloodshed everywhere. A couple of days ago, there were air attacks all over Cuba from American bombers, and phony invasions have been all over the coast of Cuba, Bay of Pigs being the only full-scale one. What seems to have been a peaceful beach has now turned into a battle zone against two opposing Cuban forces. What? We've just been informed that it's too dangerous to stay in this position and we need to evac this area immediately. This is Mason Shin signing off for the both of us. Ah!
Wait! No! Excuse me, sir, but would you mind me asking you a few questions?
Sure,
Are you not one of the men who fled Cuba to come to the U.S. in 1960?
I am. I fled Cuba with my wife and 2 daughters just a couple weeks ago.
Why did you flee?
We left because our leader was overthrown by Fidel Castro. Castro is attempting to take complete control over Cuba, which has led to huge limitations on our economy and politics. He wants to rid Cuba of any American control. Although I did not trust Fulgencio Batista, a former dictator, I definitely don't trust Fidel Castro.
What will you do now?
I'm helping to invade the Bay of Pigs along with other exiles and U.S. soldiers. I hope that with the help of the U.S., Cuba can overthrow Fidel Castro.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
We've just gotten word that a bomber has crash landed in Florida, and the president has called off all bombers in Cuba.
We will keep you updated right here on Channel 6 News. Stay classy, Bettendorf.
Good morning. I'm Latish Francisco, and this is Channel 6 News. In case you haven't been with us for a while, in Cuba, Fidel Castro has gained control, and that could lead to only chaos. The Soviet Union is pushing communism on many countries, and we are allied with Cuba, so we can't let that happen. During the revolution, the United States did as much as they could to help Cuba overthrow Castro. Now we know the invasion was a horrible decision. Was it Eisenhower's fault for continuing with this plan, or Kennedy for actually going with it? Up next, we have Emily Baker giving President Kennedy an exclusive interview.
Hello, Mr. President. May I ask you a few questions?
Of course.
What did you think of the plans Eisenhower had left you to begin your presidency?
I knew Eisenhower had really wanted to finalize the plan while still in office, but was not able to complete the plan, so I made sure that I finished what he had started.
What made you finalize the plan and go through with the attack?
Fidel Castro had found out of the plan through some of our Cuban exiles, which actually made me approve the plan sooner than we originally had set.
How will this attack affect ties with Russia?
The invasion will not strengthen our ties with Russia because of the fact that the Cubans would not have been able to become a socialist government had we become successful.
What made you call off the bombers?
A plane crash landed in Florida, proving that we were truly the ones behind the bombings, which showed that Cuba was going to end up fighting back. Sorry, Lynn. I'm sorry, I must go.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Now we go to Holly Harrington in Langley, where we have Alan Dulles, the head of CIA, for an elite interview.
Hello, I am joined by Alan Dulles, the head of the CIA. Mr. Dulles, what are your thoughts on the failed invasion at the Bay of Pigs?
I believe that the CIA did what we could by training Cuban exiles to fight and regain their land. Sadly, the invasion was failed. We tried to prepare the men, but Castro troops were more ready and experienced.
I understand. Why did the CIA decide to send exiles from Cuba to fight instead of American soldiers?
The exiles wanted to go home, and we wanted to help them. These people had their homes taken away, and they deserve to get that back. And the only way to do so was to attack Castro.
What went wrong?
Before and during the invasion, there were multiple times that vital information was released. This information about the invasion reached Castro. Because he was aware of the attack, he was ready.
What now?
Now there is tension between the United States, Cuba, and of course Russia. This loss has deemed our country as weak. We are not weak. Russia may believe that we are no longer a threat, and that is not true. America will always overcome.
Thank you, Mr. Dulles. Back to the studio.
Thanks, Holly. After all these events have taken place over all these years, we've had a tension with Fidel Castro in Cuba, his revolutionary forces, and, most importantly, the Soviet Union. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a tragic loss, and it'll leave our relationship with the USSR tense. What may happen? Only time will tell. Stay classy, Bettendorf.
Honor that.
That would be so good!
Yeah, I thought I should get some credit Same thing.
Except for the eyes.
Basically,
We,
same
need
thing.
to, we can only have the journal
Excuse
back.
me, sir, but would you mind me asking you a few questions?
Sure.
Are you not one of the men who fled Cuba to come to the U.S. in 1960?
I am. Fled Cuba with my wife and daughters. My 2 daughters. Okay.
I started. No!
Just a couple weeks ago.
Why did you flee?
We left because our leader was overthrown by Fidel Castro. Castro was overthrowing and attempting to complete control over Cuba, which doesn't make sense.
Excuse me, sir, but would you mind me asking you...
Sorry, that was